Whether the United States were to succeed or fail in their economical and political undertakings, the people must still develop some intellectual life of their own, and the character of this development was likely to interest mankind. New conditions and hopes could hardly fail to produce a literature and arts more or less original. Of all possible triumphs, none could equal that which might be won in the regions of thought if the intellectual influence of the United States should equal their social and economical importance. Young as the nation was, it had already produced an American literature bulky and varied enough to furnish some idea of its probable qualities in the future, and the intellectual condition of the literary class in the United States at the close of the 18th century could scarcely fail to suggest both the successes and the failures of the same class in the 19th. In intellectual tastes, as in all else, the Union showed well-marked divisions between New England, New York, Pennsylvania, and the southern states. New England was itself divided between two intellectual centers, Boston and New Haven. The Massachusetts and Connecticut schools were as old as the colonial existence, and in 1800 both were still alive if not flourishing. Society in Massachusetts was sharply divided by politics. In 1800, one half the population, represented under property qualifications by only some 20,000 voters, was Republican. The other half, which cast about 25,000 votes, included nearly everyone in the professional and mercantile classes and represented the wealth, social position, and education of the Commonwealth. But its strength lay in the congregational churches and in the cordial union between the clergy, the magistracy, the bench and bar, and respectable society throughout the state. This union created what was unknown beyond New England, an organized social system capable of acting at command either for offense or defense, and admirably adapted for the uses of the 18th century. Had the authority of the dominant classes in Massachusetts depended merely on office, the task of overthrowing it would have been as simple as it was elsewhere. But the New England oligarchy struck its roots deep into the soil and was supported by the convictions of the people. Unfortunately, the system was not and could not be quickly adapted to the movement of the age. Its starting point lay in the educational system, which was in principle excellent, but it was also antiquated. Little change had been made in it since colonial times. The common schools were what they had been from the first. The academies and colleges were no more changed than the schools. On an average of 10 years, from 1790 to 1800, 39 young men annually took degrees from Harvard College, while during the 10 years 1766 to 1776 that preceded the Revolutionary War, 43 bachelors of arts had been annually sent into the world, and even in 1720 to 1730 the average number had been 35. The only sign of change was that in 1720 to 1730 about 140 graduates had gone into the church, while in 1790 to 1800 only about 80 chose this career. At the earlier period, the president, a professor of theology, one of mathematics, and 4 tutors gave instruction to the undergraduates. In 1800, the president, the professor of theology, the professor of mathematics, and a professor of Hebrew created in 1765, with the 4 tutors, did the same work. The method of instruction had not changed in the interval. Being suited to children 14 years of age, the instruction itself was poor and the discipline was indifferent. Harvard College had not in 80 years made as much progress as was afterward made in 20. Life was quickening within it as within all mankind. The spirit and vivacity of the coming age could not be wholly shut out. But nonetheless, the college resembled a priesthood which had lost the secret of its mysteries and patiently stood holding the flickering torch before cold altars until God should vouchsafe a new dispensation of sunlight. Nevertheless, a medical school with 3 professors had been founded in 1783, and every year gave degrees to an average class of 2 doctors of medicine. Science had already a firm hold on the college, and a large part of the conservative clergy were distressed by the liberal tendencies which the governing body betrayed. This was no new thing. The college always stood somewhat in advance of society, and never joined heartily in dislike for liberal movements, but unfortunately it had been made for an instrument and had never enjoyed the free use of its powers. Clerical control could not be thrown off, for if the college was compelled to support the clergy, on the other hand, the clergy did much to support the college. And without the moral and material aid of this clerical body, which contained several hundred of the most respected and respectable citizens, clad in every town with the authority of spiritual magistrates, the college would have found itself bankrupt in means and character. The graduates passed from the college to the pulpit, and from the pulpit attempted to hold the college as well as their own congregations facing toward the past. Let us guard against the insidious encroachments of innovation, they preached, that evil and beguiling spirit which is now stalking to and fro through the earth, seeking whom he may destroy. These words were spoken by Jedediah Morse, a graduate of Yale in 1783, pastor of the church at Charlestown, near Boston, and still known in biographical dictionaries as the father of American geography. They were contained in the election sermon of this worthy and useful man delivered June 6, 1803, but the sentiment was not peculiar to him or confined to the audience he was then addressing. It was the burden of 1,000 discourses enforced by a formidable authority. The power of the congregational clergy, which had lasted unbroken until the Revolution, was originally minute and inquisitory, equivalent to a police authority. During the last quarter of the century, the clergy themselves were glad to lay aside the more odious watchfulness over their parishes and to welcome social freedom within limits conventionally fixed. But their old authority had not wholly disappeared in country parishes. They were still autocratic. Did an individual defy their authority, the minister put his three-cornered hat on his head, took his silver-topped cane in his hand, and walked down the village street, knocking at one door and another of his best parishioners to warn them that a spirit of license and of French infidelity was abroad, which could be repressed only by a strenuous and combined effort. Any man once placed under this ban fared badly if he afterward came before a bench of magistrates. The temporal arm vigorously supported the ecclesiastical will. Nothing tended so directly to make respectability conservative and conservatism a fetish of respectability. At this union of bench and pulpit, the Democrat had no caste, he was not respectable, he was a Jacobin, and no such character was admitted into a Federalist house. Every dissolute intriguer, loose liver, forger, false coiner, and prison bird, every hair-brained, loud-talking demagogue, every speculator, scoffer, and atheist was a follower of Jefferson, and Jefferson was himself the incarnation of their theories. A literature belonging to the subject exists, stacks of newspapers and sermons, mostly dull and wanting literary merit. In a few of them, Jefferson figured under the well-remembered disguises of Puritan politics. He was Ephraim and had mixed himself among the people, had apostatized from his God and religion, gone to Assyria, and mingled himself among the heathen. Gray hairs are here and there upon him, yet he knoweth not. Or he was Jeroboam, who drove Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a great sin. He had doubted the authority of revelation and ventured to suggest that petrified shells found embedded in rocks 15,000 feet above sea level could hardly have been left there by the deluge, because if the whole atmosphere were condensed as water, its weight showed that the seas would be raised only 52.5 feet. Skeptic as he was, he could not accept the scientific theory that the ocean bed had been uplifted by natural forces, but although he had thus instantly deserted this battery raised against revelation, he had still expressed the opinion that a universal deluge was equally unsatisfactory as an explanation, and had avowed preference for a profession of ignorance rather than a belief in error. He had said, "It does me no injury for my neighbors to say there are 20 gods or no God," and that all the many forms of religious faith in the Middle States were good enough and sufficient to preserve peace and order. He was notoriously a deist. He probably ridiculed the doctrine of total depravity, and he certainly would never have part or portion in the blessings of the new covenant or be saved because of grace. No abler or more estimable clergyman lived than Joseph Buckminster, the minister of Portsmouth in New Hampshire, and in his opinion Jefferson was bringing a judgment upon the people. "I would not be understood to insinuate," said he in his sermon on Washington's death, "that contemners of religious duties and even men void of religious principle may not have an attachment to their country and a desire for its civil and political prosperity, nay, that they may not even expose themselves to great dangers and make great sacrifices to accomplish this object. But by their impiety they take away the heavenly defense and security of a people, and render it necessary for him who ruleth among the nations in judgment to testify his displeasure against those who despise his laws and condemn his ordinances." Yet the congregational clergy, though still greatly respected, had ceased to be leaders of thought. Theological literature no longer held the prominence it had enjoyed in the days of Edwards and Hopkins. The popular reaction against Calvinism, felt rather than avowed, stopped the development of doctrinal theology. and the clergy, always poor as a class, with no weapons but their intelligence and purity of character, commonly sought rather to avoid than to challenge hostility. Such literary activity as existed was not clerical but secular. Its field was the Boston press, and its recognized literary champion was Fisher Ames. The subject of Ames's thought was exclusively political. At that moment, every influence combined to maintain a stationary condition in Massachusetts politics. The manners and morals of the people were pure and simple. Their society was democratic. In the worst excesses of their own revolution, they had never become savage or bloodthirsty. Their experience could not explain, nor could their imagination excuse wild popular excesses. And when in 1793 the French nation seemed mad with the frenzy of its recovered liberties, New England looked upon the bloody and blasphemous work with such horror as religious citizens could not but feel. Thenceforward, the mark of a wise and good man was that he abhorred the French Revolution and believed democracy to be its cause. Like Edmund Burke, they listened to no argument. It is a vile, illiberal school, this French Academy of the Sans-Culottes. There is nothing in it that is fit for a gentleman to learn. The answer to every democratic suggestion ran in a set phrase: look at France. This idea became a monomania with the New England leaders and took exclusive hold of Fisher Ames, their most brilliant writer and talker, until it degenerated into a morbid illusion. During the last few months of his life, even so late as 1808, this dying man could scarcely speak of his children without expressing his fears of their future servitude to the French. He believed his alarms to be shared by his friends. Our days, he wrote, are made heavy with the pressure of anxiety, and our nights restless with visions of horror. We listen to the clank of chains and overhear the whispers of assassins. We mark the barbarous dissonance of mingled rage and triumph in the yell of an infuriated mob. We see the dismal glare of their burnings and scent the loathsome steam of human victims offered in sacrifice. In theory, the French Revolution was not an argument or a proof, but only an illustration of the workings of divine law, and what had happened in France must sooner or later happen in America if the ignorant and vicious were to govern the wise and good. The bitterness against Democrats became intense after the month of May 1800, when the approaching victory of Jefferson was seen to be inevitable. Then, for the first time, the clergy and nearly all the educated and respectable citizens of New England began to extend to the national government the hatred which they bore to democracy. The expressions of this mixed antipathy filled volumes. Our country, wrote Fisher Ames in 1803, is too big for union, too sordid for patriotism, too democratic for liberty. What is to become of it? He who made it best knows. Its vice will govern it by practicing upon its folly. This is ordained for democracies. He explained why this inevitable fate awaited it. A democracy cannot last. Its nature ordains that its next change shall be into a military despotism. Of all known governments, perhaps the most prone to shift its head and the slowest to mend its vices. The reason is that the tyranny of what is called the people, and that by the sword, both operate alike to debase and corrupt, till there are neither men left with the spirit to desire liberty, nor morals with the power to sustain justice. Like the burning pestilence that destroys the human body, nothing can subsist by its dissolution but vermin. George Cabot, whose political opinions were law to the wise and good, held the same convictions. Even in New England, wrote Cabot in 1840, where there is among the body of the people more wisdom and virtue than in any other part of the United States, we are full of errors which no reasoning could eradicate if there were a Lycurgus in every village. We are democratic altogether, and I hold democracy in its natural operation to be the government of the worst.